Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Hello and welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Tuesday, January 27th, 2026.
Good to be here.
If you are listening to this, you have survived another rotation of the planet, and what a rotation it has been.
You know, rotation feels like the right word today. The world feels like it's spinning just a little bit faster than usual.
Just a little bit. We usually kick these off by saying it's a busy news day. But looking at the stack of stories you brought in, this feels different.
It does.
It feels like a convergence point. We aren't just looking at one story. We're looking at, 6 different massive shifts happening all at the same time on planet Earth and off it.
That's the key, I think. Today isn't just about the 24-hour news cycle. We are looking at structural changes. We're seeing a rewriting of the cosmic map, a rewriting of human history, and literally a redrawing of the geopolitical alliances that have, held the world together since the Second World War.
Right. So for everyone listening, here is our mission today. We are your global news analysis bureau. We have combed through the scientific journals, the diplomatic cables, the market reports, and some really, really dense policy papers so you don't have to.
We did the reading.
We did the reading. And we're going to try and synthesize all of this into something that actually makes sense.
No fluff, just the signal. And the signal today is loud.
Incredibly loud. Just to give you a taste, we've got astrophysicists calling today a dream come true about the dark universe.
And we have archaeologists who have found something in Greece that pushes the timeline of human innovation back by, hundreds of thousands of years.
Hundreds of thousands. And that's just the science. On the geopolitical front, we've got what's being called the mother of all trade deals between India and the European Union.
Which is, it's a direct response to what's happening in both Washington and Beijing.
And at the same time, gold has just smashed through the ceiling. It hit $5,000 an ounce.
And there's a new U.S. national defense strategy that basically tells the rest of the world, good luck, you're on your own.
That is a very blunt way to put it.
But not inaccurate.
Not inaccurate at all.
Oh, yeah.
So from the weather on Mars to civil unrest in Minneapolis, Minnesota, we are covering it all. So let's not waste a single second. We are going to start with the biggest picture possible. We are going to space.
The cosmos. It's always a good place to gain a little perspective.
Okay, let's unpack this one first. The headline that is absolutely everywhere today is about the dark universe. Scientists have just released a massive amount of data from the Dark Energy Camera, or DCAM.
Right.
And they've been collecting this for 6 years. The press release literally calls it a dream come true. Now, I'll be honest, when I hear scientists say dream come true, I usually assume they found a new particle or something.
Yeah.
But we've known about dark energy for a long time, right? Why is this specific map such a big deal?
That's a really fair question. And to understand why this is a dream, you have to understand the nightmare that astrophysicists have sort of been living with for a while.
Yeah.
The nightmare, okay.
Well, we've known for decades that the universe is expanding. And not just expanding, but that expansion is accelerating. Something is pushing everything apart, and it's overcoming gravity. We call that force dark energy.
And our best guess is it makes up, 68% of the universe?
About that, yep.
So-
68%. It's the ghost in the machine. We can't see it, but the math just doesn't work without it.
Right.
But here's the problem. Until now, that was largely theoretical. We assumed it was there because it had to be. What DCAM has done, after staring at the southern sky for 6 years and cataloging 226 million galaxies.
226 million.
The scale is just mind-boggling. But what it's done is create a map of clumpiness.
Clumpiness, is that the official scientific term?
Stick with me here. The universe, right after the Big Bang, was a pretty smooth soup of particles. Over billions of years, gravity did its job. It pulled matter together into clumps, galaxies, stars, clusters of galaxies.
The stuff we can see.
The stuff we can see. But dark energy does the opposite. It pushes things apart. It tries to smooth everything back out. So by measuring exactly how clumpy the universe is today versus how clumpy it was billions of years ago, we can measure the strength of that tug of war between gravity and dark energy.
Ah, so they're mapping the history of that fight over cosmic time.
Precisely. And the dream come true part is that the data matches our standard model of cosmology perfectly. There is a real fear among physicists that maybe our understanding of gravity Einstein's general relativity just broke down at cosmic scale.
That we'd have to rewrite everything.
That we'd have to throw out the books. But this data says, no, Einstein was right. It validates that dark energy is a constant force. It moves us from, we think this is happening, to, here is the observational map of the invisible forces shaping reality.
That is just wild. It's so humbling, isn't it?
Yeah.
We spend our whole lives obsessing over matter, our cars, our houses, our coffee cups. And all of that is just, it's a rounding error in the universe.
It's the foam on top of a very deep, dark ocean.
Speaking of oceans of data, there's another astronomy story today that I found even more mind-bending, and it's about how we're actually finding these things now. It involves the Hubble Space Telescope and AI.
Yes, the anomaly-matched neural network. This is a complete paradigm shift.
So break this down for us. NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, has decades of data from Hubble just sitting in archives. And they basically unleashed an AI on it.
Correct. The Hubble archive is massive. I mean, it's just too big. Humans can only look at so much. So a team of researchers trained a neural network, this anomaly match, not to look for things we already know about.
Like a spiral galaxy or a red dwarf star.
Exactly. They trained it to look for weird.
Weird was the technical parameter they put in.
Effectively, yes. They trained it to spot anomalies, things that don't fit the existing patterns. And in just 2.5 days, this AI sifted through 100 million image cutouts from the Hubble data.
2.5 days. How long would that take a team of human astronomers?
Lifetimes. I mean, literally multiple lifetimes of work. And it found over 1,300 unique cosmic anomalies that humans had completely missed.
And what are we talking about here? What kind of anomalies?
We're talking about strange merging galaxies, gravitational lenses where the light from a distant object is bent in bizarre ways, star-forming clumps that just, they defy our current classifications, things we didn't even know to look for.
This feels like a turning point for the profession. And I always have this image of an astronomer as the person in the parka, shivering in an observatory looking through an eyepiece.
The era is over. It's completely dead. The modern astronomer is a data scientist. We have too much data coming in terabytes every single day from the James Webb Telescope, from DeCam. The bottleneck isn't the telescope anymore, it's the analysis.
It's us. We're the bottleneck.
We are. Anomaly Match proves that AI is now the primary tool for discovery. It frees up the humans to do the thinking, the theorizing, while the AI does the grunt work of just hunting for the strange stuff.
It's exciting, but does it worry you at all that we're handing over the process of discovery to an algorithm?
Not really. It's a tool. It's no different than the invention of the microscope or the telescope itself. It just lets us see things we couldn't see before.
Fair enough. Let's move from the digital frontier back to the physical one. Artemis 2. The astronauts are officially in quarantine. This is getting very, very real.
It is. This is the crew that will circle the moon. It's the first time humans have left low Earth orbit since the Apollo missions. But what really caught my eye in the reports today wasn't just the future, but the cargo they're taking with them.
The piece of the Wright Flyer.
Yes. NASA is flying a small piece of fabric and wood from the original Wright brothers plane. The one that flew at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina back in 1903, they're flying it to the moon.
That is just heavy with symbolism.
It's beautiful, isn't it? Think about it. In 1903, two brothers from Ohio managed to hop off the ground for 12 seconds.
12 seconds.
And a little over 120 years later, we are taking a piece of that very same machine into deep space. It really highlights the incredible acceleration of our species. We went from, can we even fly, to interplanetary species in basically 2 lifetimes.
It gives you goosebumps. And speaking of other planets, we've got some weather reports coming in. And honestly, the forecast on ancient Mars is wet.
Very wet if you look at the geology. The Curiosity rover has found something called kaolinite.
Kaolinite? That sounds like an ingredient in a face mask or something.
It is, actually. It's a type of clay mineral, but geologically it tells a massive story. On Earth, kaolinite only forms in very wet tropical environments. We are talking rain, floods, persistent humidity.
Wow.
So finding this on Mars suggests that the ancient Martian climate wasn't just a little slushy with some ice. It might have been legitimately tropical.
So Mars wasn't just a cold, wet rock. It could have been a rainforest, or at least a swamp.
Swampy is a good way to put it. And this changes the search for life dramatically. If you have a warm, wet, tropical environment for millions of years, the odds of biology emerging go way, way up compared to just a frozen tundra.
And while Mars is looking tropical in the past, Venus is looking, well, a little dangerous in the future.
Yeah, there's a predicted meteor shower this July.
A meteor shower on Venus. I didn't even know we tracked that sort of thing.
Who to now? It's caused by the debris trail of an ancient asteroid that broke up a long time ago. It's just a good reminder that the solar system is basically a shooting gallery. These debris streams intersect planetary orbits all the time.
We usually only care if they hit Earth.
Of course, but watching them hit Venus gives us invaluable data on how these streams evolve and disperse over time.
And speaking of dangerous space weather, let's talk about the sun. The headline is Magnetic Avalanches. That sounds like a sci-fi weapon.
It does, doesn't it? This is a brand new finding about solar flares. We used to think of a flare as just one big explosion on the sun's surface, but new research is showing they're actually triggered by a cascade.
A cascade.
It starts with small magnetic reconnection events, these tiny little snaps in the sun's magnetic field that then trigger larger ones, which trigger even larger ones. It's like a tiny snowball rolling down a hill that ends up causing a massive avalanche.
Okay, so why should the average person listening right now care about magnetic snowballs on the sun?
Because those avalanches throw enormous amounts of radiation and charged particles directly at Earth. They can fry satellites, they disrupt GPS. In a worst-case scenario, they can take down entire power grids.
The Carrington event.
The modern-day Carrington event, yeah. So if we can understand this avalanche mechanism, we might be able to predict the really big, dangerous flares before they happen. It's all about protecting our electrical infrastructure down here.
Before we leave space, there's one last story that feels like a bit of a buzzkill, but an important one. The contamination risk on the moon.
This is the core ethical dilemma of exploration. New studies are warning that the exhaust from our moon landers, the very ships we are sending to find water and signs of life, could contaminate the ice in the polar craters we want to study.
So we land to check for pristine ancient ice, and our rocket exhaust just blasts it with earthly chemicals.
Exactly. We are bringing our own pollution with us. It's the observer effect on a planetary scale. By going there to study the history of the solar system, we might actually be erasing the data. It's a very fine line that NASA's going to have to walk very, very carefully.
All right, let's come back down to Earth, or actually, let's go under the Earth. Segment 2, Unearthing the Past. And honestly, this first story, I had to read it twice. 430,000-year-old wooden tools found in Greece.
In the Megalopolis Basin, yeah. This is a rewrite of the history books, a genuine one.
Okay, 430,000 years, let's be clear. We're not talking about humans, are we? We're not talking about Homo sapiens.
No, we are not. Homo sapiens, that's us. We only show up in the fossil record maybe 300,000 years ago. These tools were made by our ancient ancestors, likely Neanderthals, or maybe even Homo heidelbergensis.
The significance isn't just the incredible age, it's the material, right? Wood rots.
Wood rots. Finding stone tools is easy. Stone survives for millions of years. Finding a piece of worked wood from almost 500,000 years ago is a miracle of preservation.
And these weren't just, broken sticks they were using as clubs, right?
Well, that's the key. These were engineered. The archaeologists found tools clearly used for digging, likely for edible tubers. They had selected specific types of wood like boxwood and juniper, which are hard and durable. They had stripped the bark, and most impressively, they had fire-hardened the tips.
Fire hardening. That implies a process, a multi-step process.
It implies a complex industrial process. Think about it. You have to identify the need, I need to dig. You have to find the specific raw material, this type of wood is best. You have to process it, strip the bark, shape the point. Then you have to control fire to harden it without just burning it to ash. And then you have to use it.
It really challenges that ego we have, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We like to think of us as the smart ones and the ancient hominins as these sort of grunting apes banging rocks together.
But if they were doing what amounts to chemical engineering with fire 500,000 years ago.
Then they had executive function.
Yeah.
They had planning. They had culture. It really blurs that line between human and animal in a pretty significant way.
Absolutely.
Speaking of lines blurring, let's jump forward in time, but still way back to the Silk Road. A Tang Dynasty tomb in China.
This one is just a fascinating visual. Archaeologists in the city of Taiyuan in China found a mural inside a tomb from the Tang Dynasty, and it depicts a man with blonde hair and distinctly European features.
This is central China in the 8th century.
It's a powerful reminder of what the Silk Road actually was. We learned about it in school as a trade route, silk going west, glass and spices coming east. But it was a genetic highway. It was a conveyor belt of people, of ideas, of cultures.
So this blonde man wasn't just a tourist passing through.
No, he was likely part of the community, or a diplomat, or maybe a merchant who decided to stay. It shows a deep, embedded multiculturalism. And not far from there, on the Tibetan plateau, they found something else just as incredible.
The golden armor. That headline definitely caught my eye. It sounds like something out of a video game.
It does, but it confirms history that was thought to be myth. They found a legendary set of golden armor belonging to a Tuyuhun king.
A two-human king.
It was a powerful kingdom in that era. The ancient texts always describe them as incredibly wealthy and militarily powerful, with their kings literally draped in gold. And historians often just dismiss that as poetic license, and they're like, oh, they're just exaggerating for effect.
And now we have the armor.
And now we have the armor. It proves that this was an empire of immense opulence that has been largely forgotten by Western history.
I love that. When archaeology proved the myths were true, from golden armor to massive stones, Stonehenge. I feel like every year there's a new "we solve Stonehenge" story, but this one seems, well, definitive.
This one uses rigorous mineral analysis, which is why it's so compelling. For a century, there has been this huge debate. Did humans move the bluestones all the way from Wales to Salisbury Plain, or did glaciers push them there during the last ice age?
And the verdict is?
Humans. The mineral analysis proves that the stones were actively quarried from specific sites in Wales. Glaciers don't quarry stones, they just scrape them up.
So we are back to that logistical nightmare. Moving these massive stones hundreds of kilometers from Wales to England in the Neolithic era, how on earth did they do it?
It just highlights the incredible organizational capacity of Neolithic people. We shouldn't underestimate them. They didn't have wheels or cranes, but they had social cohesion. They could mobilize hundreds, maybe thousands of people for a singular generation-spanning purpose. This wasn't an accident of nature. It was a feat of sheer human will and engineering.
One last dig into the past, and this one is medical mystery. A 5,500-year-old skeleton found in Colombia.
Yeah, this is rewriting the history of disease. In this skeleton, scientists found the oldest known genome of the syphilis bacterium.
5,500 years ago. That is thousands of years before Columbus or any Europeans arrived in the Americas.
Correct. There has been this long, contentious debate about whether Columbus and his crew brought syphilis back to Europe or if it already existed there in some form. This finding proves that treponemal diseases, that's the family syphilis belongs to, were already diversifying in the Americas long before European contact.
It changes our whole understanding of how pathogens evolve with human populations.
Exactly. It's amazing how a single bone fragment can just upend a centuries-old narrative.
Okay, let's fast forward to the present and the future. Segment 3, the technology landscape. And we have to start with what is being called a transistor moment for quantum computing.
This is a big claim, but the sources seem to back it up. Scientists at a couple of different labs have achieved a major breakthrough in how they measure and manipulate quantum entanglement.
Okay, we need to slow down here. Quantum entanglement, transistor moment. Can you break this down for the non-physicist? Why does this matter so much?
Sure. Think about the transistor. Before the transistor, computers were the size of entire rooms. They used these big, hot, unreliable vacuum tubes, and they broke down constantly. The invention of the transistor allowed us to shrink everything down and make it reliable. It's what made the entire digital age possible.
And quantum computers have been stuck in that vacuum tube phase.
Exactly. They've been unstable, incredibly error-prone, and very hard to scale up. Because quantum states are just so fragile, right? If you even look at them wrong, they collapse.
The measurement problem.
The measurement problem. But this new technique allows scientists to measure and manipulate the entanglement, the spooky connection between quantum particles, without actually destroying it. It's like being able to check the wiring inside a computer without turning off the power.
And that opens the door to error correction.
That's the holy grail. Once you have reliable error correction you can scale, you can start building a practical, useful quantum computer, not just a cool science experiment.
So we're moving from the lab bench to something that could actually be an industrial machine.
We are on the threshold. And speaking of industrial machines, let's talk about something as old school as it gets. Steel.
I was surprised to see steel in the tech stack today. We've been making steel since the Iron Age. What more is there to learn?
Well, it turns out we can still make it better. The discovery here is all about diffusion. When you make steel, you are basically mixing carbon atoms into a lattice of iron atoms. You need the carbon atoms to move around and settle into the right spots. That process is called diffusion.
And usually, you need massive amounts of heat to make that happen.
Which means massive amounts of energy and, carbon emissions. But what scientists have found is that if you apply a strong magnetic field during the process, you can slow down or control that diffusion. You can lock the atoms in place or even guide them where you want them to go.
So you're using magnets instead of just brute force fire.
Magnets and fire, but in a much more controlled way. And the result is steel that's stronger because you control the microscopic structure better and it's more energy efficient to produce. It's a huge potential win for green manufacturing.
That is fascinating. It's material science having a direct impact on the climate crisis. And speaking of the climate, AI is getting heavily involved there too. NVIDIA is building something called Earth 2.
A digital twin of the entire planet.
That sounds like a plot from a Matrix sequel.
It kind of does, but it's actually incredibly practical. NVIDIA is building a complete physics-accurate simulation of the Earth's climate system. If you can model the weather and climate on a digital twin, you can predict disasters like hurricanes or floods with way more lead time.
And you can test interventions.
Right. You can ask the model, what happens if we plant 1 billion trees in this specific region? Or what's the impact of this new type of power plant? And you can see the results without having to wait 50 years in the real world.
That sounds incredibly useful.
Yeah.
But while AI is busy building worlds, big tech is stumbling a bit in the real one. Let's talk about the latest Windows 11 update.
The first big update of 2026, and by all accounts, it is a mess.
I feel like I can hear a collective groan from our listeners right now. What happened?
It seems to be crashing Microsoft Outlook for a lot of users. Some are even reporting boot failures where their computer won't start at all. It's the classic fix one thing, break two things scenario, but it's a stark reminder of the fragility of our digital infrastructure.
We run the global economy on this software.
We do. And when an update goes bad, productivity just vanishes for millions of people.
And Google isn't having a great week either. They're paying out $68 million.
That's a settlement over Google Assistant. It turns out there were instances where it was recording private conversations when it wasn't supposed to be active.
That is the ultimate nightmare scenario, isn't it? You're talking in your kitchen thinking you're completely alone, and your smart device is just taking notes.
And storing them on a server somewhere. It's a privacy breach that hits home literally. And it's why we are seeing such a huge pushback against this kind of big tech surveillance. People are getting much more protective of their digital privacy.
And speaking of pushback, let's look at social media. The whole TikTok saga continues.
Right. So following the acquisition of TikTok's U.S. operations by Larry Ellison and Oracle, we're seeing a user migration. A new app called Upscrolled is seeing a massive surge in downloads.
Upscrolled. That's a catchy name. It sounds like users are fleeing the new ownership structure.
It's the classic cycle of social media. A platform rises, it gets incredibly popular, it gets acquired or changes its rules. The original users feel alienated and they move on to the next new thing. We saw it with MySpace, we saw it with Twitter and X. Now we're seeing it with TikTok.
It shows that even these giants aren't invulnerable.
Not at all. And finally, in the tech world, the Game Developers Conference GDC. This is usually a huge party for the video game industry, but this year it's a boycott.
Why?
A significant number of international developers are skipping GDC 2026. And the reason they're giving is explicitly political. Safety fears, and what they're calling a growing ICE presence in the U.S.
ICE, as in Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Yes. This links directly to the geopolitical and domestic tensions that we are going to talk about later. Tech doesn't happen in a vacuum. If developers from Europe or Asia don't feel safe traveling to San Francisco because of U.S. immigration policies, the entire industry suffers. It's a brain drain happening in real time.
Which brings us perfectly to our next segment, geopolitics and the New World Order. And we have to start with what one outlet is calling the mother of all trade deals.
This is the headline of the day for the global economy. After years of talks, India and the European Union have signed a massive free trade agreement.
Now, I want to push on this a bit. We hear about trade deals all the time. Why is this particular one the mother of all deals?
It's all about the context. This negotiation dragged on for 15 years. It was dead in the water multiple times. India is historically a very protectionist economy. Make in India is their core policy. They do not like lowering tariffs. But suddenly they've crossed the finish line, and you have to ask, why now?
I'm guessing because the world got a lot scarier in the last few years.
Exactly. This is a de-risking deal. Both India and the EU are looking at the U.S. under President Trump's America First policies, and they're looking at an increasingly assertive China, and they are realizing they are vulnerable, they are too dependent, they need a third option.
A third pillar of the global economy.
A multidimensional relationship, as they're calling it. So India opens its massive market to European cars, wine, and airplanes by slashing tariffs. In exchange, India gets access to high-end European technology and investment. But the real value here is strategic. It's about not being completely dependent on the whims of Washington or Beijing.
And it coincides with French President Emmanuel Macron and other EU leaders attending India's Republic Day parade. That's a very strong visual signal.
It is. It says we are partners now. It's the world's middle powers organizing themselves to create a new balance.
Meanwhile, the U.S. is shifting its own strategy in a big way. We have the new National Defense Strategy, the NDS 2026.
Which is being dubbed America First in uniform. The core doctrine is being called resolute realism.
Resolute realism, that sounds firm. If you strip away the marketing jargon, what does this actually change for, say, a NATO general sitting in Brussels?
It changes his blood pressure, for one. Resolute realism is essentially code for we are stepping back. The document clearly states that the U.S. is moving away from its role in democracy promotion and nation building, and it explicitly says the U.S. now expects Europe to handle the conventional defense against Russia on its own.
So the U.S. provides the nuclear umbrella and maybe the Navy, but the tanks on the ground in Eastern Europe need to be German and Polish and French.
Correct. The U.S. is telling its allies, the burden is shifting to you. You need to pay up and build up.
And what has the reaction from NATO been?
It's basically panic, phrased in diplomatic language. The NATO Secretary General came out and admitted that Europe has a heavy dependence on the U.S. and needs urgent capability upgrades, which is diplomat speak for, we are not ready for this. They know they can't fill the gap the U.S. is leaving, at least not yet.
But here's the risk. Nature abhors a vacuum. If the U.S. steps back, who steps in? Or who acts out? And we have some pretty dramatic news coming from inside China about a high-level purge.
General Zhang Yuxia. He's one of the top generals in the PLA, the People's Liberation Army. He is now under investigation for corruption and get this, for allegedly leaking nuclear secrets to the United States.
Wow. That is a massive accusation to level against your top military commander.
It indicates a massive internal shakeup. It suggests either deep instability or deep paranoia within the Chinese leadership. And yet, externally, China is still pushing its boundaries. There are new reports they're militarizing yet another artificial island in the South China Sea.
So they're shaking hands with India with one hand, purging generals with the other, and building military bases on islands with a third. It's complex.
It's incredibly volatile. And speaking of volatile, let's quickly touch on Ukraine and Russia. There were trilateral talks held in Abu Dhabi.
The U.S., Russia, and Ukraine. President Zelensky came out and said U.S. security guarantees are 100% ready. That sounds promising.
It does, but you have to read the other side. The Kremlin is urging patience. They're saying there have been no breakthroughs yet. However, the EU isn't waiting on the talks. They just gave their final approval to a total ban on Russian gas, which will be effective in late 2027.
That's the long game, cutting the economic cord completely.
It took 4 years since the invasion, but it's finally a done deal. Europe is closing the tap for good.
And in the Middle East, specifically in Gaza, we have a very significant and somber development.
Israel has retrieved the body of Ran Giveli, who was believed to be the last remaining hostage, from a cemetery in Gaza.
This was a grim milestone that many were waiting for.
It was, but diplomatically, it satisfies a key condition of the peace plan that was proposed by President Trump. And now, the very next step in that plan is for Israel to reopen the Rafah crossing.
Which is critical for humanitarian aid to get into Gaza.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the main humanitarian artery. So we are seeing movement. It's painful, it's slow, but it is movement.
Let's shift gears to the numbers. Segment 5, economic indicators. And there is one number that everyone is staring at today. 5,000.
Gold. It topped $5,000 an ounce for the very first time in history.
So the question for our listeners is, why? Is everyone suddenly buying a lot more jewelry?
No. Gold is a fear gauge. When the price of gold goes up this dramatically, it means faith in everything else is going down. Investors are hedging against the weakness of the U.S. dollar. There's a sell America momentum building in the currency markets.
And that's because of the new tariff policies.
It's a mix of things. It's the tariff fears, it's the potential for more government shutdowns, and just general uncertainty about U.S. fiscal policy. When the U.S. dollar looks shaky, the world buys gold. It's the ultimate financial bunker you can hide your money in.
And speaking of money, big tech earnings are coming out this week. Apple, Meta, Tesla.
The market is holding its breath. The S&P 500 futures are rising in anticipation, but the Dow is dragging a bit, mostly because of a bad report from United Health. It's a very mixed bag. Everyone is waiting to see if the tech giants can keep delivering growth in this chaotic global environment.
And a quick note from our neighbor to the north, Canada. The new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, is making some moves.
He's unveiling a multi-billion-dollar push to try and lower food costs for Canadians. And diplomatically, he's planning a visit to India in March.
Trying to navigate this new trade landscape in the shadow of the U.S. tariffs.
It seems to be the theme of the day, doesn't it? Every country is trying to figure out how to do business while the fundamental rules of the game are being rewritten.
All right, segment 6. Climate, weather, and energy. We talked about space weather, but the weather down here on Earth is intense.
Arctic siege is the headline being used in the U.S. We have 19 states with over a foot of snow. 800,000 people are without power, and there are at least 7 confirmed deaths from the storm.
That is a massive footprint for one storm system, and the UK isn't being spared either.
They've just named Storm Chandra. It's their 3rd named storm in a single month. There are severe wind and rain warnings across the country. The problem is the ground is completely saturated. It just can't take any more water.
And in Mozambique, in southern Africa, it's even worse.
The southern part of the country is experiencing massive flooding. It's displaced 600,000 people. And there are these horrifying reports of crocodile attacks.
Crocodile attack.
Yes. When the rivers flood their banks and go into the villages, the wildlife, including the crocodiles, moves with the water. It's a terrifying compounding factor in an already catastrophic situation.
This level of extreme weather really feels like it's becoming the new baseline. It's stressing infrastructure absolutely everywhere.
It is, and it's not just the weather that's hurting us, it's our own materials. A new report is out today in the Lancet Planetary Health Journal about plastics.
This was a very depressing read.
It was. The report's headline finding is that emissions from the life cycle of plastic could double the health damage they cause in the next 20 years. But the number that really stuck with me was 83 million years of healthy life lost.
That is a staggering metric. It's not just about dollars and cents. It puts a real human cost on our convenience.
It does. But there is a small glimmer of hope on the energy front. From NASA and GE Aerospace.
Finally, some good news. A hybrid electric aircraft engine.
They've tested it successfully, and it provides a 10% fuel efficiency boost.
Now, 10% might not sound like a lot to a layperson.
But in the aviation industry, 10% is massive. It saves airlines billions of dollars in fuel costs, and it means millions of tons of carbon emissions are avoided. It's a huge step toward decarbonizing air travel.
And in Europe, leaders are meeting in Germany for a North Sea summit.
Their goal is to turn the North Sea into a massive clean energy reservoir, huge offshore wind farms, and green hydrogen production facilities. This is the flip side of the Russian gas ban. If you're going to turn off the Russian gas tap, you have to turn on something else. And for Europe, the North Sea is the answer.
Moving to our final segment before we wrap up, U.S. domestic and political friction. And it has been a very heavy week in America.
Specifically in the city of Minneapolis, Minnesota, the civil unrest there is escalating.
And this all stems from the shootings that involved federal agents, ICEE agents, and the killing of a nurse named Alex Pretty.
It's rapidly becoming a jurisdictional crisis. The state's governor, Tim Walz, is calling it an inflection point. The tension is between the state government, which wants to de-escalate and protect its citizens, and the federal enforcement actions.
And the White House seems to be distancing itself from the initial federal response, which shows they know how politically volatile this is.
Absolutely. And you have the media angle, with some outlets being accused of placing a target on the city. We're also seeing wrongful death lawsuits being filed against the Trump administration related to drug boat strikes. It really feels like the legal and social pressure is boiling over.
It's a pressure cooker.
Ah.
And across the pond, in the United Kingdom, they're having their own political realignment.
Suella Braverman,
The former Home Secretary.
she has defected from the Conservative Party and joined Reform UK. That's Nigel Farage's party.
That is a major blow to the Conservatives.
It is. It splits the right-wing vote and throws their strategy into chaos. But the Labour Party isn't having a smooth ride either. 50 of their own MPs have signed a letter publicly objecting to the party's decision to block a popular mayor, Andy Burnham, from running for parliament.
So both major UK parties are dealing with pretty significant internal rebellions.
It seems that political stability is in very short supply on both sides of the Atlantic right now.
I want to end this segment with a quote from the author Salman Rushdie. He was speaking at the Sundance Film Festival.
He said, "For the authoritarian, culture is the enemy."
It's just such a powerful reminder. In the middle of all this politics and unrest and shouting, art and culture still matter. They're the counterweight.
Absolutely. They are the mirror that we hold up to our own reality.
So we have covered a lot of ground today. Let's try to synthesize this. Let's try and weave these threads together.
I think if you pull back, you see a world that's just in a state of profound transition. We have this cutting-edge science AI, quantum computing, the fusion of aviation and space travel that is accelerating us into the future at a breakneck speed.
And at the very same time, archaeology is pulling us back, showing us that our ancient ancestors were far more capable and complex than we ever gave them credit for.
And caught in the middle of that push and pull, we have this geopolitical map that is being completely redrawn in real time. You have India and the EU finding each other because they don't trust the old superpowers anymore.
You have the U.S. turning inward with America First in uniform, and you have the planet itself just screaming for attention with these historic storms and floods.
The big picture is that the world is not static. It is shifting under our feet, politically, geologically, and technologically. We can't just operate on the old maps anymore. The old maps are wrong.
And that brings us to our final provocative thought for you to take away.
As we're looking out at the dark universe and we're waiting for meteors to hit Venus, are we paying enough attention to the fragility of the world right here?
What do you mean by fragility?
I mean the connections. We just saw how a magnetic avalanche on the sun can take out the power grid in Texas. A policy change in Washington moves gold prices in London and Tokyo.
Yeah.
A storm in Mozambique highlights a climate reality that ends up affecting insurance rates in New York. We are in a tightly coupled global system, and if one part breaks, the shockwave now travels everywhere, instantly.
That is something to chew on. We are all in the same boat, whether we happen to like the other passengers or not.
Indeed.
Stay curious, stay safe in the storm, and keep watching the stars. But maybe watch the ground, too. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.
For enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
Welcome to the debate. You know, if you've been watching the financial terminals or even just the breaking news chyrons over the last 72 hours, you know that we are sitting at a real vantage point in history. This is late January 2026, and the tectonic plates of the global order, while they aren't just shifting, they are colliding. I mean, we are looking at gold smashing through $5,100 an ounce. We're seeing the U.S. dollar touching 4-month lows, and this sell America momentum is just rippling through global markets from Tokyo to Frankfurt. But the central question we really need to wrestle with today isn't just about the numbers on the screen, it's structural. Are these economic shocks the sound of a catastrophic collapse of international cooperation? Or are we finally witnessing the painful, messy, but maybe absolutely necessary birth of a truly multipolar world?
Yeah, and I have to say, painful might be doing a lot of heavy lifting in that introduction. Because from where I'm sitting, looking at the data and the diplomatic cables from the last few days, this looks less like a birth and more like, well, a demolition. We're seeing a level of aggressive protectionism and the weaponization of trade against allies, not adversaries, but allies, that we just haven't seen in the post-war era. The United States isn't just stepping back. It feels like it's locking the door and checking its gold reserves while the whole neighborhood burns. This is a retreat into a kind of isolationism that, frankly, threatens to leave the world without a firefighter.
I see why you feel that way. I do. And certainly the headlines are alarming if you're deeply attached to the status quo of the last 30 years. But let me offer a different perspective. My position is that this turbulence is actually a return to what I'd call values-based realism. We are seeing nations like India, France, and, those in the global south finally asserting some necessary autonomy. We're moving away from a single superpower's hegemony toward a system where responsibility is shared. And yes, that transition is volatile, but it's not the end of the world. It's the beginning of a more balanced one.
And I, frankly, just don't buy that optimism. This isn't balance, it is fragmentation. What you call realism looks remarkably like coercion to me. We are seeing America First mutating into a form of isolationism that is actively cannibalizing its closest partners in Europe and Asia. When you have stability crumbling, gold skyrocketing, and the rule of law being tested from Minneapolis to the South China Sea, that's not a transition. That is a dangerous descent into volatility and vindictiveness.
All right, let's get into the specifics then, because I think the evidence actually points toward a self-correcting system.
You look at the United States turning inward, okay, but look at what's happening elsewhere as a result. We are seeing the, quote, mother of all trade deals being finalized between the European Union and India. This is exactly what a multipolar world looks like. Independent power centers connecting without needing Washington as the chaperone.
But at what cost? You can't just wave away the friction costs of that disconnection.
Well, the cost is the illusion of stability we had before. I mean, even the U.S. National Defense Strategy, the NDS 2026 that was just released, is moving toward what it calls resolute realism. The U.S. is finally admitting it cannot be the world's policeman. And that's forcing allies like France and South Korea to mature their own strategic capabilities. And on the markets, the weakness of the dollar and the rise of gold and silver isn't just fear. It's diversification. It is the world saying we need tangible assets, not just promises from one central bank.
I'm sorry, but calling this diversification is an incredibly charitable interpretation of what really looks like panic buying in a vacuum of leadership. When gold hits $5,100, that's an alarm bell, not an investment strategy. And regarding your point on resolute realism, let's look at the implementation. We have the U.S. slapping a 25% tariff on South Korea, a treaty ally, because of legislative delay. We have threats of 100% tariffs on Canada. This isn't forcing allies to mature, it is risking liquidity crises. I mean, South Korea is terrified of a repeat of the 1997 crash.
And I think we need to pause and define that, because that reference to 97 is crucial to understanding the fear in Seoul right now.
Right. In 1997, the Asian financial crisis essentially wiped out entire economies overnight. Foreign capital fled, currencies collapsed, and the IMF had to step in with these incredibly painful austerity measures. South Korea remembers that trauma vividly, and now they see Washington flirting with policies that could trigger a liquidity crisis all over again. That isn't tough love, it's economic warfare against a partner.
Okay, so let's drill down into that exact segment, the trade dynamics in Asia and North America. You view the U.S. moves as extortion. I view them as breaking a stagnant status quo. So let's talk about that 25% tariff on South Korea.
Well, it's hard to view it as anything other than extortion. The narrative from the White House is that Seoul isn't living up to the deal. But the reality is that the U.S. is demanding a $350 billion investment that was delayed by the South Korean legislature, a democratic process, mind you. To respond to a legislative delay with a massive tariff hike on autos and steel, that's not diplomacy, it's punishment. And it's not just Korea. The threat to send fighter jets into Canadian airspace if the F-35 deal doesn't go through, that is the behavior of a mob boss, not a strategic partner.
I think you are missing the context of accountability, though. For decades, agreements were made and then sort of soft-pedaled. The delay of a $350 billion investment is a breach of contract. It's plain and simple. The U.S. is enforcing terms. If you sign a mortgage and you don't pay, the bank doesn't care if your family voted against paying it.
But this isn't a mortgage. This is a strategic alliance between sovereign nations, not a business transaction.
And let's not pretend South Korea is merely a victim here. While they're complaining about U.S. pressure, look at what they are doing domestically. They just passed that fake news law, imposing fines up to $690,000. They are tightening control internally while pleading for leniency externally.
That fake news law is concerning. I absolutely agree. But you have to ask why it's happening now.
Because they're tightening control.
Because they're unstable. That law is a reaction to internal instability, which is being made worse by external economic pressure. You cannot squeeze an ally's economy until their foreign reserves bleed out and then act surprised when their domestic politics turn authoritarian. And on the China factor, let's be honest about this. The tariffs on Canada weren't just about trade. They were triggered by Canada's refusal to align perfectly against China.
Exactly. And that is the point. We are consolidating a bloc that actually agrees on security. If you want access to the American market, you cannot simultaneously undermine American security interests regarding China. That is the definition of the new realism. It's ending the era where you could have the U.S. security umbrella while economically bolstering the U.S.'s primary rival.
But by forcing that choice with a sledgehammer, you are driving them away. You mentioned the China factor. China is looking at this U.S. behavior threatening Canada, tariffing Korea, and they are presenting themselves as the stable alternative. You are creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where the U.S. isolates itself.
I disagree. I think the U.S. is simply raising the price of admission to its alliance. But let's look at Europe, because you mentioned earlier that the EU is fracturing. I see the opposite. I see the North Sea Energy Summit and France's push for a domestic military industry, specifically the whole dispute over the Storm Shadow missiles, as proof that Europe is waking up. They are realizing they need to be autonomous.
See, autonomy is one thing, paralysis is another. The EU-US trade deal ratification has been put on ice. And why? Because the former president, who is now back in the mix, wants to annex Greenland again. This Greenland spat has paralyzed serious economic diplomacy. How can Europe build autonomy when they are being dragged into these surreal territorial disputes by their supposed transatlantic partner?
The Greenland interest, while yes, bluntly stated, reflects a strategic reality about the Arctic. As the ice melts, that territory is key. But look past the headlines. The real story in Europe is the decoupling from the old energy dependencies. And yes, Prime Minister Fico in Slovakia is suing over the 2027 Russian gas ban, calling it energy suicide. But that friction is natural. You cannot unplug from Russian energy without some pain.
Pain is a huge understatement. Fico's arguing that the ban bypasses unanimous approval and infringes on treaties. It's tearing the political fabric of the EU apart. It's not just a lawsuit. It is a member state saying that Brussels is destroying its economy. And while you say they're decoupling from the East, look at the labor market. Russia just signed an agreement with India to bring in 40,000 workers. The global South is engaging with Russia regardless of what Brussels or Washington thinks.
That is a perfect example of the multipolar world I'm describing. The Russia-India labor agreement and the EU-India trade talks show that the world is bypassing the old East-West binary. India is dealing with Europe and Russia. That is healthy. It means the world isn't just two camps anymore.
It means the sanctions regime is failing and the so-called values-based order is a myth. If India is sending labor to Russia while Russia is waging war and simultaneously signing trade deals with the EU, it shows that opportunism has completely replaced principle.
I would call it pragmatism, not opportunism. And that brings us to the global South and the jungle, as it were. We have to talk about what is happening in Latin America and the Middle East, because this is where this values-based realism really hits the pavement.
We certainly do. If we are talking about realism, we have to talk about the return of hard power. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group deploying to the Middle East, that isn't a subtle diplomatic nod. And in our own hemisphere, the situation with Venezuela is terrifying. We have these allegations regarding the kidnapping or capture of Nicolás Maduro. China has condemned this as a violation of international law. This resonates deeply in the global South. It looks like the U.S. returning to 20th century regime change tactics.
Okay, but I would frame it differently. Look at the outcome. We have Delcy Rodriguez, the Venezuelan Minister of Oil, immediately announcing reforms to the oil sector. We have Venezuelan oil shipping directly to the Louisiana offshore oil port. I mean, this America First doctrine creates space for countries like Venezuela to negotiate on pragmatic terms, energy for economic stability, rather than ideological ones. The capture of Maduro, however it happened, broke a deadlock that was starving the Venezuelan people.
But that is such a Machiavellian take. The ends justify the means? Look at the instability it breeds. You have Iran denying contact with the U.S. and warning of responses to aggression. You have the axis of resistance viewing the U.S. as a rogue actor that kidnaps heads of state. This doesn't build stability, it builds an insurgency against American power. You say it's pragmatic because the oil is flowing, but for how long? If the rule of law means nothing, then contracts mean nothing.
Well, contracts mean something when they are enforced, which brings us back to the economic barometer. We can't ignore the signal from the markets. Gold is at 5,100. Russia has accumulated $326.5 billion in gold reserves.
Right, and we need to explain why that is happening.
Because nations are returning to tangible assets over fiat promises. And for the listeners, fiat money is, currency that isn't backed by a physical commodity like gold. It's backed by faith in the government that issues it. The weaponization of the dollar through sanctions, freezing assets, has taught the world a hard lesson. If you want sovereignty, you need gold. This protects nations from having their economy turned off by a switch in Washington. It's a return to honest economics.
Honest economics? I'm sorry, it sounds more like a return to the dark ages of finance.
When gold skyrockets and the dollar dumps to a 4-month low, that isn't just smart diversification for central banks. It creates inflation that hurts the poorest global citizens the most. That historic rally in gold and silver is a sign of deep systemic fear. It's the market saying, we do not trust the future.
Or it's the market saying we do not trust the debt. The US dollar has been propped up by the assumption that the US is the only game in town. Now, with the rise of the BRICS nations, with the EU trying to find its own footing, capital is going where it feels safe from political manipulation, and it is no longer safe in treasury bonds if the US government is going to tariff its allies and weaponize the currency.
But you can't have it both ways. You can't celebrate the U.S. using resolute realism to tariff Korea and Canada, and then cheer for the world fleeing the dollar because of that same U.S. unpredictability. The planetary perspective right now looks like a collection of burning fires. We haven't even touched on the environmental aspect, these Arctic siege weather patterns freezing the U.S. and Europe while we're arguing about who owns Greenland.
The weather is indeed a crisis, but it highlights why energy independence is so vital and why that North Sea summit actually matters. You cannot rely on global supply chains when the weather, or a war, can cut them off.
It matters, but are they solving it? We have a winter storm knocking out power to millions, exposing infrastructure that has been neglected because we are too busy fighting trade wars. To summarize my view, abandoning global cooperation for this rugged sovereignty is leading to an erratic, dangerous world where the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must.
And I would summarize by saying the old order was an illusion of stability that suppressed national interests. It kept Europe dependent, Asia compliant, and the global South ignored. What we are seeing now, India rising, Europe militarizing, Latin America selling resources on its own terms, is a healthier, more honest state of affairs. Yes, the transition is rocky. Tariffs are blunt instruments. Lawsuits within the EU are messy. But independent poles of power are emerging.
I suppose we will see if those poles can support the roof or if they just crash into each other.
Indeed. And with the 2026 midterms approaching in the US and elections in Japan reshaping the LDP's alliances, this volatility is likely just the beginning of a very decisive year for the planet.
On that, at least, we agree. It is going to be a long year.
Thank you for joining us on the debate. We leave it to you to decide. Do you prefer the dangerous freedom of a multipolar world or the stability of the old hegemony? Until next time.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.